at all times.
All right, we are live. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Spiritual Activist episode number 4. We've got an amazing crew for you today. I want to welcome Paul Cooper to the show. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you. We've got David Pagan from Kick-Ass Dad. We've got Kelly Marceau from kellymarceau.com. We've got Rahul Bhambhani from The Invincible Man. Welcome everybody. It's great to have you back.
Thank you.
So, real quick, I want to shoot it right off to Paul. So, Paul is a freedom coach, and he's hitting the streets, helping people to begin to unlock their innate potential. And so, I'd love to hear from you, Paul. What turned you on to this, and where has it brought you?
Oh man, what turned me on to it? About 3 or 4 years ago, my whole world just started to kind of crumble around me, and I think I did what most people do is they somewhere along the way in their early adolescence or whatever, they build this persona that's gonna, supposed to work for them in the world, and it didn't work. It crumbled, and I was married for 8.5 years, and that I saw that slowly decline, and then escalate to a point where like we split apart, and then after that I fell in love and with another woman that really just wrecked my whole world and showed me the gap between like full accountability and the codependent kind of messy thing that I was doing before that. And once I got a hold of what the gap was, I went to Bali for a transformational journey. It was like 11-day guided meditation with Hoot Blackson, which was pretty great, and gave me the tools I needed to manage my inner environment. But then the major part of my journey was going home. My mom is she's a trauma therapist and has a doctorate in divinity. Anyone can tell her anything about spirituality or psychology, and she was ready to just trigger me back to the day I was born. Like, she invited me home, and I was like, oh man, that's the last thing I want to do is go home to mom. Like, she drives me nuts. And then the next day I saw Ram Dass's quote, and it said, if you think you're so enlightened, go spend a week with your parents. And so so while I was there, I decided I was not going to do anything for money that I wouldn't do for free. I was done doing anything for money that I wouldn't do for free. And then I took that stance with with a really high degree of clarity, and I also, with my parents, I told them I was not going to accept any gifts from them that came with strings attached or conditions attached to them. And so in that container, I just let the triggering begin, and just spent so much time just moving emotions and basically letting my mom clear my whole emotional field, and without even realizing it, she was setting me free. And I went through breakdown after breakdown, so did she. Our relationship is amazing now. She's still not really clear on what all happened, why things had to be as difficult as they were, but through her breakdowns, she just I could see her carry herself lighter and smile more genuinely and laugh more openly. And I mean, it was really cool to see her lighten up and to feel myself be able to be myself in the face of my parents, because my theory was that if I could be myself with my family, the people that are the most challenging to me, then I could do it anywhere in the world. And so as I continued just doing only what I was inspired to do, independent of the money, I found myself coaching people and guiding people through whatever they were going through in their lives, and I just kept doing it until I got good enough at it that people started paying me money for it. And that's what I work with, is the very, very core stuff, the places and people that almost nobody wants to go, because most people haven't gone that far.
And that's really deep, because a lot of people are afraid of what they'll find if they begin to go that deep and look that existentially at their internal landscapes, and so many of us are just petrified to even think about doing that. But once you begin to do that, as you said, you're gonna have those breakdowns, and you're gonna have those days where you just feel like absolute crap, and you just have to allow that energy to move through you, because as you resist it or you run away from it, it follows you. And that's why I love this idea of first doing the inner work. You know, that's the spirituality part, and then the activism part is going out and doing the outer work, and that's where you're kind of at now. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, but it's been really, really cool to go on this inner journey, and then to be able to, like, taken some restraint not to just rush out into the world and say, oh, look, I've got this and whatever, but just to move forward slowly and just like let the momentum build and let the reflection show me, you know, where I'm at, and it's like this really fine balance between the two worlds right now that I'm in, and I'm really enjoying it, because like action's definitely a part of it, but it's not the primary part of it, in my opinion. There's a balance between like action and restraint, and having the resolve to know like when to act and when to just observe, you know. And as we move forward, I think doing it that way like will allow something organically to build that's going to support me for the rest of my life, and that's what I want.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Kelly?
Go first. No,
okay.
Go first.
Okay, so, you know, like this idea of doing the inner work, you know, when I dropped out of school 7 years ago, this whole journey with my parents began, and it was like this, it's been a long drawn out process of this breakdown process that you're talking about, and like reclaiming everything that is mine that I took on from them when I was born, right? So, and now I'm here at their home, and I've been in that process that you were in my own way. So it's cool because I can see how doing this work has contributed to me being able to create more profoundly in the world and provide more something that's truly remarkable, like create from that place. So my question for you is, what role do you think, or do you feel this inner work and, you know, let's just say going all the way to like tracing it back to the roots of living with your family or spending time with your parents again, how do you think that affects a person's ability to be a spiritual activist, and whatever that means to you?
I mean, I think it's the groundwork. Like that inner work is the foundation that we lay, and it's like digging for a foundation to build your house on. Like you can dig until like the ground's kind of solid, or you can dig all the way down to the rocks and build your house on that. And I think that's what it is. The deeper we go with that foundational inner work, the more capacity we have to build, to create higher and to build broader, because our foundation is that much more powerful and grounded.
Thank you. That's awesome. Kelly, you had something?
Yeah, I just wanted to know with your work, when you talk to other people, you know, you've gone through your sort of your own personal download and, you know, confronting your own triggers, but what about when you come up against other people's triggers? Like, how do you actually teach them to work with their triggers, or to like stare them down to the point that they're not triggered anymore? Because like everybody has different mechanisms that they're working with and they're dealing with, and ultimately you've been through what you've been through, but I'm wondering, how do you apply that to other people?
Well, it has to do with what I'm able to hear without getting triggered myself, because at the point where like a coaching and coachee relationship starts to break down and they start to not serve each other anymore is the point where both of them are getting triggered. And so if somebody's trying to go deeper and I'm willing to go as a coach, then I'm no longer able to help them. But since like I'm willing to just go all the way to the bottom of the ocean, the mechanism through which they're getting triggered has less to do with it than my ability to not be scared by their trigger. And right. So when they're triggered, because their trigger doesn't trigger me and I can hold space for it, then it's easy to identify what the mechanism is that they're getting triggered by and help them uncover what that mechanism is, bring awareness to it, and dissolve it.
And what's the process for you that you help them? So I like this terminology, and it's starting to make sense in my head. So we're noticing this trigger in people, this thing that sets them into a particular emotional state or behavioral state. And so you're identifying, because you're not being triggered, you're identifying that mechanism, what's causing that to happen. And so now you identify it, and you uncover it, you hold the space for that to exist so you can be there with them during this period. How are you then helping them to see the trigger? How are you helping them? What is the technique, the mirror that you're using to show them to themselves?
Well, because as we bring awareness to it, then it's as if like I'm going in with a flashlight into it and shining light on it, and then they can, and pointing their attention to it as well. So then instead of, a lot of times what happens is when people have triggers they don't know what to deal with, the next thing they do is come up with an action step to avoid getting triggered that way, or to avoid feeling the way they're feeling. And so what I do is I divert their attention from creating action in the outside world. I divert their attention inward and point them inside themselves to where they're being triggered, and then kind of just hold them there in the emotion, so that and then we process the feeling together. And once the feeling moves, then they're able to sit there comfortably and see what's going on, and kind of like a Lego set, just kind of take apart the pieces and put it back together. And that kind of happens naturally internally for the person, because that type of restructuring and rebuilding our inner environment is actually innate to who we are. Like, we want to do that. So once we can get past the fear and past the whatever we're trying to avoid within ourselves, once we move past that, then it becomes natural for us to take it apart and reassemble it in such a way that it's in greater alignment.
That sounds like a lot of fucking work, Paul.
Is that David?
I didn't even know he's still there.
Yeah, here.
He's still here.
That's gotta be David.
It's awesome.
Sounds like a lot of work. That resonates with me a lot, especially identifying those things. Mike and I play an active role in a coaching program called the Greatness Zone, and it identifies what they call SAIL, S-A-I-L, and it's either your own super committee in your head telling you can't do things, you're not good enough. A standing for assumptions that you're just making because things were this way for you in the past, they're going to continue to be that way. I standing for interpretation, so is that just the way you see it, and why is that? And then L standing for limiting beliefs. Those are primarily the main things that keep us from moving forward, or keep us from doing things, or why we're not happy in our own situations and just kind of refuse to do anything more or push yourselves. They, like you mentioned, they try to just avoid it. Well, I'll never be able to do this, so I'll just avoid those things. Or this happens, I feel this way when this happens, so let me just avoid that situation instead of analyzing why, what actually triggers us. Why are we feeling that way? Is it the way we were raised? Do I feel like less of a man when this happens because that's actually the case? As Mike says, does my penis just fall off? Because I do a certain thing or not, or is that some assumption or limiting belief, that a man can't do this or can't do that? And I've personally found it does not fall off, and I've tried many times, and it's fixed on there pretty well. But
lots of people tug on them all the time, and they don't fall off.
Yeah, all kinds of stuff. Lorena Bobbitt would have a hard time getting mine off.
Wow.
But,
no pun intended there, right, David?
No, that was straight at it. No, but I found that I definitely, and maybe it's not the same for everybody, but for me, a lot of those limiting beliefs and a lot of interpretations and a lot of those seats on our super committee are taken up by parents, the people that we grew up with, and so I find that a lot of spiritual awakening does start at the home, or at least going back there, and that when you come to terms with that, and then you can kind of remove yourself from that environment and look at it from the outside, and then understand, hey, explain to them maybe, and it doesn't always work. I don't have a great relationship with my parents anymore because they're, still stuck in the dark ages. But I've explained to them, hey, look, these limiting beliefs and these interpretations that you guys downloaded on me, made this laptop or this hard drive crash, and that's the same thing that's going on, in the rest of the world. So, to try to help them see, it doesn't always work, but I find that most spiritual activists or enlightened people start at home.
Or at least, and that's a great point, David, or at least within themselves about their home or where they came from. And I certainly know that was my experience. My whole world crashed down around me several years ago when my sister got, nearly deathly ill, and it was me having to, see this and then look at my own family and look at where I came from in my childhood, and it was all these wounds just began to reopen, and it wasn't until I began to get really honest with myself and honest with the people around me and speak my truth, even though it was a hard truth, even though it was painful, and it literally ripped my heart out. I remember, getting off the phone with my mom at a certain point and just crashing to the floor in tears, the way our relationship had become, and it was so profoundly painful, and I didn't want to deal with it, but I had no choice but to deal with it. And oftentimes we get faced with these things in our lives where we can't hide anymore, and it's almost as if we live in a point in history when life is coming back at us so quickly and so powerfully that we cannot hide. And so this idea of having to face those triggers and face your childhood and face your past those are the things that are keeping us from growing spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and fulfilling our greatest passion, vision, and purpose. And so if we want to be happy, to your point, you got to go home sometime.
Right. Yeah, it's powerful when, and family has such a crazy ability to do it. Like, they can just annihilate you in just like a few words sometimes. Like, it's brutal. And if you think about it, and I mean, thinking back on like where I was at with how much energy I was flowing and how much emotions I was flowing and how much I was hurting when I was at home, like, I felt like I was almost going insane. But now I've never felt so whole and so clear than I do right now, because I was moving all of that stuff. And when you get to feel yourself within that level of emotional discomfort, it really gives you a sense of who you are in a way that is really hard to find elsewhere. Like, you have, because you feel yourself within the emotion, and the emotion all of a sudden isn't you anymore. Like, it's something you're experiencing, but it's not you. And
that doesn't destroy you.
It has this ability to like refine you and connect you to the truth of who you are.
Yeah, it doesn't destroy you. That is profound. I mean, coming back here to be with my parents for the last month has been an exercise in that, right? Like, touching places I hadn't experienced before, moving emotions that I hadn't allowed myself to before because I was scared. Scared of feeling those things, because I mean, if I were to translate that fear, it's like I would be destroyed by them. It would envelop me, and I would never find myself again. I'd be lost forever, right? I don't even know what the mind would think, but it's like, the moment I actually came here, within 5 minutes, I had to move into something that I could sense before I even came here, but like with my dad, where he had this like need to control me and like put conditions on me being in his space, and I was just like, Dad, I am not going to stay here as your son. It's like, I'm here for a reason. I am your son, and if you place conditions on me, that's what you've been doing my whole. And like, dude, it was like an explosion beyond anything I've ever experienced. But on the other side of that, like, the most profound love flowed between me and all of the other family members, because all this energy that was being consumed, that was being held back, was able to move, and it was beautiful. So, like, I'm just sharing that because it's incredible, because for anyone listening who is afraid, which we're all afraid of these intense frequencies that want to move through us, it's like when we say yes to them and let ourselves experience it, there's so much life and fulfillment and love with the people that we didn't even think that we could possibly love that way, that's available to us. And it translates into like our relationships with our partners too, right? Like our relationship with our mother is like the way we relate to our woman, right? Or vice versa for women. So it's profound work for sure. You got to face that frequency, that feeling.
Absolutely.
Please, Kelly.
Cool? I like
yeah, that's cool.
Okay, cool. Thanks. The interesting thing about the family structure is that we're all born into the story that we're born into, and ultimately, like as we grow older, we have to sort of disidentify with what we've been brought up in versus who we actually are as people. And I know that like a lot of parents mold their kids into wanting them to be like them, and then when kids are born and they're just so radically different, it starts this whole mess or this upheaval in family structures. But the one thing about family structures that's interesting is that it's an opportunity for everybody to really understand what it means to unconditionally love people, to be in a structure where you can be so angry at somebody to the point that you think like you'll walk away, like you're not going to do this anymore or whatever, but you're forced to be brought back to something much deeper than that. Because I mean, all of us as kids, like we love our parents unconditionally, and even if we grow up and we can't deal with who our parents actually are because they're not evolved or they won't listen or they don't receive us, or you know, we can't grow with them or whatever it is, there's this foundation of love and being able to work within that sphere that is so different than like in our relationships with other people or our friendships or intimacy. Like I feel like in friendships and even relationships that we have, you know, we can just peace out at any point, but it's a lot harder when you have family to just peace out from them because you're so entangled and your whole foundation was built on that kind of unconditional love. So when I met Paul and he was telling me what he did with his mom, I thought that was really incredible because I thought I was the only person in the world who had ever challenged my parents to the extent that I did. So it's like this whole foundation of being able to confront your parents and confront your demons with them is pretty revolutionary work. Like I don't know a lot of people who have actually really called their parents out on their shit or have the balls to do that. I don't know that many people. Mm-hmm. So the fact that all of us are kind of doing that in our own way is pretty righteous.
Yeah, I've got goosebumps all over just thinking about what you're saying there, Kelly, because that's something that had never occurred to me in the past, that my path was in doing that really, you know, and I got called selfish, I got called all kinds of things for speaking up honestly about what was going on in my family, and you know, they told me I was selfish, I was just doing it so I feel better, not caring about anybody else, and that was really, really, really hard. And so sitting here listening to all of you who have done very similar things.
It's not that they're telling you that you're selfish and that you're doing it just for you, when the reality is like they can't even hold space for your feelings. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're talking your feelings, and instead of actually holding space for your feelings, you're being called selfish. Like that's not allowed. It's not okay for you to actually voice your truth. And so many of us are actually dealing with that reality where even in relationships, we're not allowed to voice what we feel and have somebody hold space for it. It's always, we're selfish, we're this, we're that. And at some point, it's like if somebody can't hold space for how you feel in any capacity, and that's what I love about Paul, because Paul actually like will hold space in the most intense, painful situations and like fucking deal with it, even if it's like tearing him apart. And like most people don't do that. Most people are just like, they run, they don't want to deal, like there's so much stuff going on. So anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Michael, but that's so interesting that you experience this as you're the selfish one and you're only thinking about yourself when they're not even thinking about you at all.
Thank you. No worries at all. Please feel free to interrupt any time. And that's powerful. And that's really what, and I love this idea of allowing space for, you know, and to your point about relationships, we don't do that enough. We're constantly being told by media messaging and everything that comes in our faces that things are supposed to be a certain way. And if you have any feeling, thought, idea that isn't consistent with this mainstream mentality, and you bring it up or you speak to that, somehow you are creating, you know, nastiness for other people, when in fact that's the only way we're going to get to the root of this whole thing. And it's mind-blowing to me that everybody on this call is doing that in one way or another. Hi, Andrea. How are you?
Hi. Good. Hi, guys.
Hi, Andrea.
Late.
Andrea's been having some technical difficulties today, so we do appreciate you joining us, Andrea. So we were just recapping here about how critical it is, and this is Paul's work and pretty much all of our work, is going back to that, you know, real center place in our hearts and in our childhood, and beginning to break down walls and barriers and start to voice our opinions and feelings about things that we felt growing up. And so taking that and beginning to shift it so that we can now, and quite honestly, I would not be doing this right now. I would not have done Kick-Ass Dad. I wouldn't have done the Spiritual Activist. I wouldn't have started anything of this if I had not first done that work of facing my parents or facing my childhood or speaking up, because I would be too held back in my own self emotionally to be able to even move forward with anything like this.
Absolutely. I wanted to add in on something Kelly was saying, where family doesn't give us the option to just peace out, because there's that unconditional love is like built into the relationship with them, because like you came out of them, like it's there. And when you go back home and face your family and get clear with them, then all of a sudden piecing out isn't the first thing that comes to your mind in any of your other relationships either. And like all of a sudden that doesn't, you don't just peace out because you don't get along with someone. You face it and you like transmute it and you grow from it. And when you start engaging every relationship in your life with that kind of resolve, and not just like, oh, I'm done with you, you're difficult to deal with, like, you change everything. Your whole friggin' world changes when you can sit with that level of like clarity in yourself and bring that to the world, and not start trying to like push people away or pull them toward you because you're trying to like sort your circle. Like your circle will sort itself if you just like stand clear and be present with everyone that shows up, and you don't have to like peace out anymore. And that's freedom, is when you don't have to like avoid people or tiptoe around things or whatever. You can just walk through the world, and there's something beautiful about that. And that's what I think the container of family offers us, is the chance to find that level of clarity. And it feels like a battle a lot of times, because man, I went through the same thing. I was the worst son ever. They wish they never had me, you know, like you name it, something said.
No son of mine.
Like, but now, like, underneath all that, guess what? Booga, booga, booga. I'm your son. You still love me. Too bad.
Booga, booga, booga. Indeed.
Yeah, that's a technical term.
Something else that needs to be addressed in all of this is that we live in a disposable culture, you know, where people don't want to deal with anything difficult. And so the fact that we actually do have that family structure, or that we were even born with something a little bit more permanent where you can't just say, fuck it, I'm not going to deal, it's a really beautiful thing, because ultimately it's like that's our home, that's what we go back to. And I feel like the more you communicate with your parents and actually work through that stuff, like the better that your adult relationships are going to be with other people, you know what I mean? So that you don't just get involved with somebody and then just bail when it gets difficult or whatever. Like, you know, in our culture, like, we're all about bailing, and that's just not how you treat people. And why we know that on some degree about our families, that we have these hard, you know, these deep connections with, and not about people, it's really weird that that gap exists, and yet it does.
Ultimately, we're all family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's a great point. And so it's almost as if the family, the biological family, is a representation of our human family. It's a small paradigm that teaches us we can't escape. We can't just run away from this. Any part of us ourselves that is sick requires healing. And so as long as we run away, you know, life gives you lemons, you say fuck it and bail. You know, that's a representation of ourselves who are no longer facing the part of ourselves that is sick. And so that human, that biological family gives us that opportunity to understand what real love and deep compassion is, and we have to face all of it, as scary as it is. And the only thing in my life that has got me through fear is action. The more I sit on the sidelines of life, the more I think about it, the more I contemplate it, the scarier it gets. And so if you want to overcome the fear of jumping off a cliff, jump off a cliff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the dumbest thing I ever heard, Michael. Jumping off a fucking cliff for you, dude. I think when it
I
comes
got your symbolism, dude. I got the symbolism.
no, Mike really wants you guys to jump off a fucking cliff. That's what you don't get. He's a
We gotta have a disclaimer. We're gonna put a disclaimer on this video.
Do not.
3 people jumped off a cliff after watching this show.
Exactly. Yeah. We're losing listeners, man. When you say
That's how pure the vibration was. They just went and did it.
Exactly. Now, what I find about it that was so amazing for me when it came to the human family, obviously with my immediate family, but in my human family, what I started to realize after opening my eyes and knocking down all these social constructs and my family constructs and all this stuff that I genuinely, personally, in my heart didn't believe. And then I started to realize, okay, well, what is it in me? Why do I feel this way? So on and so forth. So in every scenario, I don't care if I was at the gas station or in a relationship with a significant other or with my family, whatever it was, I started to look at myself and say, okay, well, what is it that I'm bringing to this scenario or to this relationship that makes me feel this way? Because when you really do the work, oftentimes I personally found that it wasn't what the other person did that really pissed me off. It was whatever was going on in here at the time, and they happened to just push me over the edge a little bit, but what they actually did didn't have anything to do with why I blew up, Or when I see I saw not too long ago an elderly male at a gas station, and he was just pinned up against the wall, and this young thug was yelling at him and wanted him to touch him. He was like, touch me, I'll knock you the fuck out, blah, blah, blah. Old David would have knocked his ass out, right? And then helped the guy up, got him to his car, whatever it was. And instead, I time almost stood still for me for a little bit, and I thought, and my adrenaline started to flow, and I didn't understand why my adrenaline was flowing like when I used to fight all the time. And so instead, I was like, you know what? I know if I go up to this guy or I yell at him and say, how do you like it, or do anything like that, or try to bully him the way he's bullying this man, it's going to end badly. I know how that ends because I've been there every other time, and it always ends in a fight or whatever. I'm the one that ends up suffering, either internally or externally. So instead, I walked up to the guy, and I was like, let me just try something different. I walked up, and I just put my hand on his shoulder, the guy that was, yelling at him because the old man was kind of cowering in the corner, and I just said, that's enough. And he stopped and looked at me and didn't know what to expect, and I was like, he's all right, man. I got this. And he just, I don't know what it was about it, but he wasn't expecting that, so he turned and walked away, looking at me up and down, almost like he wanted to beat my ass, but he didn't. He just walked away, and the old guy stood up. He said, thank you, young man, and I walked him to his car so he can get in it. I'm not sure what it was all about, but it could have ended very differently. And so that scenario there helped me realize that a lot of the situations I got myself into. I added an element that wasn't there previously that escalated it, very much in a relationship, So it changed everything in my world because I was the constant in my world. So when I changed, then literally everything in my world changed in the way I handled it, including my family.
Nice.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Nice.
So I used to be a real asshole, Paul.
In summary.
I'm like so annoyed. Why can't we see David? Can you guys see David?
He's coming in and out. The visual is coming in and out.
You can't put a rainbow in a box, Kelly.
Damn it!
I'm not really sure how that applies, but it sounded cool.
Oh dear, Andrea, did you have anything to add, love?
Not really. I'm in I just came out of a pretty intense seminar, so the last few days I've just been in this deep internal process. But yeah, I did just come also on top of the seminar. I came home from being with my family for the last 5 months and living with my parents. And so basically I just got back to Los Angeles a week ago, and the last 5 months it's been a revelatory journey where I found that, you know, the last few years I have gone really deep into my relationships with my parents and looking at all of those things they brought up in me, and the triggers and the, you know, the patterns and the things that I didn't want and I didn't want to take on. And so it's just been very, very deep, painful, just sort of like that banging your head up against the wall type of processing, which I think served to a certain point until I recognized over the last 5 months that it never ever was about changing anything about my parents. It was never about changing anything about my relationship with them. It was really about coming into myself and realizing and recognizing those parts of myself that I was hiding. And so for me over the last 5 months was about owning those parts of myself and revealing that to my parents, and not the dirty, yucky, mucky stuff, but actually the beautiful, amazing parts of myself, you know? I think I came to a point where it was like, okay, I've hidden, yes, I know that there are those dark parts of me, and I think so much of my focus has been around, okay, I don't want to hide that, you know, I want those parts of me to be seen, but like I said, the last few months has really been about, what about those beautiful parts of myself? What about those graceful, gentle, loving parts of myself that I've actually been afraid to truly show or truly allow to be seen? And so that's the part of me that really has started to flourish. And revealing that to my parents, you know, and letting them see that part of me, and through that our relationship is on a whole other level. My bonds with them have crystallized, and you know, I've always known I've loved my parents, but it's just been taken to a whole other level of love with them. So
that's interesting that you say that, because I think when a lot of people begin to wake up, and this is certainly my experience, is when I started to have these realizations about the things that the behaviors I was modeling that I got from my parents, and I started to recognize those in myself. And then instead of really focusing on this internal work of evolving that, I wanted to go change them, right? So we go back, we go home, we go, oh no, you've been doing it all wrong, I figured it out. And then so now we're trying to like make them be us instead of like really looking at, you know, what we gained from them. Yes, going back and facing those old issues, challenges, being honest, speaking your truth, those are important, but the reason why is what creates the context. So if we're doing it to try to change them, we're going to have we're going to be banging our head against the walls. When we begin to reveal who we truly are, to your point, Andrea, is when we start to elevate those relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it becomes this natural, easy process where as we start revealing those, you know, the beautiful side of ourselves and letting our parents see that and feel that, they start to sense something, and they start to, you know, touch those parts of themselves as well, rather than constantly having to remind each other of our shit, you know? It's like that serves to a certain point, and then yeah, it really does get to a point where it's like, okay, but yeah, you're beautiful. let's look at these parts of ourselves now.
Right.
Yeah, which is you know, that's the power. That's big time power and responsibility. I've found, maybe even more so than, you know, looking at what's wrong and what needs to be cleared and what's, you know, all of that stuff. So
Right. And it's almost like if we focus on the positive things, we really unconsciously are clearing the negativity because we're not focused on it. It's interesting that you say that.
Yeah, it's almost like I kind of see it as those darker parts of ourselves as more holding space for us in our bodies or in our external world or whatever. It's not necessarily that they're bad. They're very important, and they're hugely important in, you know, giving us that opportunity to see our light, you know. But then, yeah, you get to a point where it's like, I don't need to bang my head up against these dark parts of myself anymore to see my light.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, for me, before coming here and just feeling into it, I was like, what's the scariest thing to me actually about being with my family? And it was like, if I were to be completely honest, it was just like sitting with them and looking at them and just telling them how much I, like, not even just telling them, but admitting it, how much I actually love them. And that actually brought me to my edge. I was like, can I just actually be here with my dad and just look at him and be like, Dad, I love you. Like, and really just penetrate, like, all the way. And that was, like, the most challenging thing to me. And what you're saying also, it's like, it can be a slippery, it's a slippery zone, right? Because we could, because of running away from that, constantly be creating conflict and think we're actually doing work, when actually the work is surrendering into what you're calling beauty or that pure love that exists. So, yeah, that's what's up.
Yeah. And it can be, it's scary, like, you know, being who you really are around people who taught you not to be that. I mean, honestly, it's not, it's just beliefs passed on from generation to generation. We're literally a species who forgot who we are and what our connection is to our greater power. And so we have all these limiting beliefs, as David put it earlier, and our parents passed those on to us. They were passed on from their parents, and so on and so on and so on, until we're at the edge. And we're at a point where humanity's literally walking itself off a cliff. Don't jump off one. And now we have the opportunity to kind of redirect by healing ourselves. And then, you know, apparently you have to go live with your parents to do that. I didn't realize everybody else did that.
Oh yeah, man! Had to do that.
You have to live with your parents.
They're the source. Your parents are the source, man.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
So is there ever a case? I wanted to ask you, Paul. Is there ever such thing as being like too self-aware, like maybe so self-aware that you forget to get gas on like a long road trip? Did you not leave space for the gas?
You didn't forget.
Hey, it could happen.
Does the Land Rover run on emotions?
Almost.
Pure positive energy.
What happened there, buddy? Walk me through that.
Thoughts.
Yeah, I'd like to. Why don't you guys share that story before we wrap up? Why don't you share that story? Kelly and Paul just recently went on a road trip. Would you care to share?
Knock yourself out, Paul. You're the guest.
You're the storyteller, though. Like, I want to hear you tell it.
Oh man.
I really enjoyed it when Kelly told it.
Oh God. Okay, so Paul and I got up really early in the morning to leave for Seattle. We were doing a turnaround trip for my boss who needed their Land Rover, and this car just guzzles gas. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, we must have stopped like what was it, like 8 or 9 times, Paul, just to get gas. It was pretty crazy.
And I think it was more frequently after the running out.
Yeah, right? Okay. So, but we were driving, and I looked at the tank, and it was half a tank, and I thought, oh, you know, we should get gas, and I mentioned it to Paul, and he's like, no, we'll be fine. And I was like, okay, like, I trust Paul, that's cool.
Oh,
we hit this stretch of road. And I'm not even kidding you. We must have stopped off 2 different times, and each town was like a little ghost town, and all of the like little hotels and the gas stations were abandoned.
They were boarded up. Abandoned, just terrible. And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, oh my God, when is there going to be gas? I'm like, we're going to run out of gas soon. Paul's like, no, we're going to be fine. The whole time he's like, we're going to be fine. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, bullshit, we're going to run out of gas. And I'm like, will you please check to see how far the gas station is from where we are? When we were pretty much on empty at this point. So Paul asks Siri how far the gas station is, and I swear to God, at this moment, I was so stressed out. And Siri says,
there's 7 gas stations very far from you. And we actually both just burst out laughing because at that point, like, it was just ridiculous. We were just like, we're so fucked. But he's still, like, holding it together like it's totally going to be fine. And I'm sitting here going, oh, my God, we have a plane to catch. I totally want to get there to see my boss. I wanted to go out to dinner with them. I didn't want to be rushed. I didn't want to walk, hitchhike. I was having all my, like, whatever, my I don't want to. And then we ended up running out of gas a mile before the exit to get gas. And so we just started walking, and all of a sudden this guy, I mean, we were walking, and I wasn't looking behind me, and all of a sudden this guy just comes out of nowhere, and it's as if like Paul has a magic wand, like seriously, like somewhere on him, and he's just like, oh, there's our ride. like he knew that this was going to happen the whole time. And I'm just looking at him going, are you fucking for real? Is this really happening right now? This dude just pulls over, like, he doesn't really say that much to us at all, just kind of looks at us like, fucking seen this shit before, takes us to the gas station, like, which is, like, so far. Like, if we had to walk, it would have been pretty, like, I mean, we would have been, I don't know, maybe, like, if we had to walk there and back, we would have been a couple hours, like, off of our trip. But he takes us there.
The gas station was 2 miles from the exit, so we were a mile from the exit, and the gas station was 2 more miles.
Okay, right. So then, like, the gas station attendant lets us borrow a gas can and then takes Paul back to the exit. So Paul only has to walk a mile. And then Paul's back, like, in and out within, like, 45 minutes. And I'm just looking at him like, I will never, ever doubt you again.
Or yourself.
Or myself. I mean, yes, next time I know I need to get gas, I will listen to myself. But ultimately, like, it was amazing. He never once went into panic mode. He was like, this is going to be fine.
Right.
And it was.
Right.
It was fine. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
It was one of the serendipitous moments where
finding
you can't really deny what's happening.
What was that, David?
I'm saying that's funny because normally when you see that movie, it ends with, like, you running out of gas, and then you go up to a station, like radioactive people underneath.
They eat you.
They eat you.
I was like, we're gonna get murdered out in the middle of nowhere.
Parallel reality that happened. You got Paul Cooper, so you're good.
Yeah, and the funny thing is more and more stuff like that keeps on happening when you just, you know, like Coot says, just surrender. You know, look at all that, not to call you out here, Kelly, but I do it too. Mike does it sometimes. We do it on a daily basis. But we bring so much shit along with us that like, you had no need to stress out there. You know what I mean? But you were stressing yourself out. Paul's sitting here eating pixie sticks and licking the dew off the flowers.
It was Sour Patch Kids, and I was like sucking the food out of the bag.
Sour Patch Kids, totally. It was an amazing exercise for me too, to sort of watch myself spin out, because I was caught between the desire to be a creator, which is to not be the victim, right? And at the same time going, I don't give a fuck what kind of powers I have. Like, we are running out of gas.
Because the power this truck needs is gas.
Exactly. So Paul basically turned thoughts into gas. Like, he's my fucking hero.
Yeah. I do the same thing with Taco Bell.
Oh, that's nice.
That's my superpower. Fuck
tacos into gas.
We did hit up Taco Bell when we came back.
You guys are amazing. Thank you so much today for joining us. Paul, if you want to share how people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on my website. It's www.hybridtruth.com, or on my Facebook page. That's www.facebook.com/soulprospector. And email or Facebook message, all that stuff works. So I'd love to hear from you. I do work with people on an individual basis, and usually for about a month at a time.
That's awesome. You can find Kelly at kellymarceau.com. The Invincible Man is Rahul. David Pagan is Kick-Ass Dad. And Andrea DiLorenzo. Hey, you changed your bottom third there. What's that say?
Yeah, I'm getting a new website, but it's not launched yet. So in the next few days.
So in the meantime, people can find you on Facebook
page. Yeah.
Cool. Check out Andrea DiLorenzo. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to meeting everyone again next week. We air live video feed on Google Hangouts every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.